Marcus sat in his modest downtown apartment on his 30th birthday, staring at his laptop screen. The number glowing back at him seemed almost unreal. $847,392. Net worth. At 30 years old, he leaned back in his chair, a slight smile crossing his face as he thought about his college roommate Tyler, who had just posted on social media about finally paying off his BMW, the third car he'd financed in 8 years. Tyler made good money, probably more than Marcus did at his day job. But Tyler also had nothing to show for it except a depreciating vehicle and a carefully curated Instagram feed that screamed success while hiding the reality of living paycheck to paycheck. Marcus hadn't always understood money. In fact, at 22, fresh out of college, he'd been just as clueless as everyone else. He remembered sitting in his first apartment eating ramen for the third night in a row, scrolling through social media and watching his classmates somehow afford luxury apartments, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways. He'd felt like he was missing something, like everyone else had figured out some secret to adult life that he hadn't. The turning point came on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon when he'd stumbled into a used bookstore to escape a sudden rainstorm. Wandering the aisles with no particular destination, his hand had landed on a worn copy of The Millionaire Next Door. He'd bought it for $4, more out of boredom than genuine interest. That $4 purchase changed everything. Reading that book in his cramped studio apartment over the next few days, Marcus realized something that most of his peers seemed to miss entirely. The people who looked rich and the people who actually were rich were almost never the same people. The truly wealthy drove older cars, lived in modest homes, and invested the difference. They played a completely different game than everyone else. That realization led to his first major purchase decision, and it wasn't what anyone would expect. Purchase 1, the side hustle investment. Marcus had always been decent with computers. Not brilliant, not a coding prodigy, but competent. He could fix problems, set up networks, troubleshoot issues. In college, he'd helped friends and neighbors with their tech problems for free, never thinking much of it. After reading that book, he made a decision that felt risky at the time. He took $1,200, money he'd been saving for a nicer apartment, and invested it in starting a proper side business. He bought a professional website domain, paid for hosting, purchased some basic diagnostic tools and equipment, and spent $300 on an online course about computer networking and repair. His friends thought he was crazy. "You're going to spend your savings on something that might not even work?" Tyler had asked, shaking his head. "Dude, just get a nicer place. You deserve it." But Marcus ignored the advice. He started small, advertising his services on local community boards and through word of mouth. His first client paid him $75 to set up a home office network. It took him 3 hours, not exactly lucrative. His second client paid him $120 to recover data from a failing hard drive. The business grew slowly at first. Some weeks he made $50, other weeks $200. But he kept at it, treating every client professionally, asking for referrals, slowly building a reputation. By the end of his first year, his side business was generating an extra $1,500 a month. Not life-changing money, but enough to make a real difference. More importantly, he was learning valuable lessons about business, marketing, and customer service, lessons that would serve him for the rest of his life. What Marcus didn't realize at the time was that this modest side hustle was teaching him the most valuable skill anyone can learn in their 20s, how to generate income independently. That skill, that confidence, that proof that he could create value and get paid for it, that foundation would support every other financial decision he made. Purchase 2, the boring index funds. 6 months into running his side business, Marcus made his second major purchase decision. Actually, it wasn't really a purchase, it was a commitment. He opened a Roth IRA and set up automatic monthly investments into an S&P 500 index fund. $200 per month automatically withdrawn from his checking account on the first of every month before he could spend it on anything else. His coworker Jennifer had laughed when he mentioned it at lunch. $200 a month? Marcus, you're 23 years old. You should be living your life, not worrying about retirement. That's like 40 years away. But Marcus had done the math. $200 per month invested at an average return of 10% annually, compounded over 40 years, would become over $1 million. $1 million built from $7 per day contributions. The beauty of the strategy was its simplicity. He didn't need to pick winning stocks or time the market or follow financial news obsessively. He just needed to let the money go in automatically and forget about it. Some months were harder than others. There were times when unexpected expenses came up, when he wanted to skip a month and use that $200 for something immediate and tangible. But he never did. The automation made it easier. The money disappeared before he could spend it, and he learned to live on what remained. What amazed Marcus most was how quickly he stopped noticing the deduction. After 3 months, $200 per month just became part of his budget, as automatic as his rent or utilities. He wasn't sacrificing anything meaningful. He was just quietly, boringly building wealth in the background while living his normal life. Purchase 3, the plane ticket. Marcus's third major purchase decision came a year and a half into his financial journey, and it surprised even him. He bought a plane ticket to Thailand. It seemed to contradict everything he'd been doing: saving aggressively, investing consistently, avoiding frivolous spending. But Marcus had been researching travel hacking, learning how to maximize credit card points and rewards programs. He'd gotten a travel rewards card, used it for all his normal expenses, and paid it off in full every single month without exception. After 18 months of this strategy, he had accumulated enough points for a nearly free flight to Southeast Asia. The entire 3-week trip cost him less than $2,000, including accommodations, food, and activities. Tyler had been skeptical. "You're going to blow $2,000 on a vacation? Dude, I thought you were supposed to be saving money." But Marcus understood something Tyler didn't. The right kind of travel wasn't an expense, it was an investment. Not in the financial sense, but in something equally valuable: perspective, confidence, and connections. In a hostel in Bangkok, he met Elena, a German entrepreneur who was building an e-commerce business selling sustainable products. Over street food and cheap beer, she explained her business model, her challenges, her strategies. That conversation planted seeds that would grow into additional income streams for Marcus years later. In Chiang Mai, he attended a digital nomad meetup and learned about remote work opportunities he'd never considered. He met people who were living unconventional lives, earning money in creative ways, freed from the traditional career path he'd assumed was his only option. The trip transformed how he thought about his own life and career. He returned home with a confidence he hadn't possessed before. The confidence that comes from navigating unfamiliar situations, solving problems in foreign environments, and realizing the world was much bigger and more full of possibility than his small circle of colleagues and friends. More practically, the trip taught him that experiences didn't have to be expensive to be valuable. He'd had a transformative 3 weeks for less than the cost of Tyler's monthly car payment. Purchase 4, the strategic education. Back home from Thailand, energized and full of ideas, Marcus made his fourth major purchase. He invested in his education, but not in the way most people think about education. He didn't go back to school or pursue an expensive graduate degree. Instead, he spent $600 on 3 specific online courses: one on digital marketing, one on web development, and one on business finance. His parents were confused. "You already have a degree," his mother said. "Why are you spending money on more classes?" But Marcus had realized something crucial. The education that matters most isn't the one that gets you credentials. It's the one that gives you skills that directly translate into higher income. The digital marketing course taught him how to better promote his side business and eventually helped him launch a small e-commerce store selling refurbished electronics. The web development course allowed him to build better websites for clients and charge premium rates. The finance course helped him understand business operations and investment strategies at a deeper level. Within 6 months, the skills he'd learned from those courses had increased his side business income by 40%. Within a year, he'd made back the $600 investment dozens of times over. But the real value wasn't just the immediate income increase. It was the mindset shift. Marcus began to see education not as something that ended with college, but as an ongoing investment he should make throughout his life. Every skill he acquired became part of his permanent arsenal, compounding in value over time. He made a rule for himself: invest at least $500 per year in learning something new that could increase his earning potential. Some years he spent it on courses, other years on books, workshops, or conferences. The specific form didn't matter. What mattered was the commitment to continuous growth. Purchase 5: The House Hack. At 26, Marcus made his most intimidating purchase yet: real estate. He'd been saving aggressively for 3 years, combining income from his day job and his side business. He'd accumulated $40,000, enough for a down payment on a small property. Instead of buying a single family home for himself, he bought a duplex in a neighborhood that was showing signs of revitalization. It cost him $280,000. He moved into one unit and rented out the other. His coworkers thought he was insane. "You're going to be a landlord?" Jennifer asked, incredulous. "That's so much work. And what if you get a terrible tenant?" His parents were concerned too. "That's a lot of debt, Marcus. Are you sure you can handle it?" But Marcus had done his homework. The rent from the second unit was $1,800 per month. His total mortgage payment, including property taxes and insurance, was $2,200. That meant his tenant was paying 82% of his housing costs. He was living in a nicer place than he could have otherwise afforded, building equity instead of throwing money away on rent, and benefiting from property appreciation, all for $400 per month out of pocket, less than he'd been paying to rent his studio apartment. The first year was challenging. He dealt with maintenance issues, learned about property management the hard way, and discovered that being a landlord required more work than he'd anticipated. There were late-night calls about broken water heaters and awkward conversations about late rent payments. But he also learned incredibly valuable lessons about real estate, negotiation, property maintenance, and business management. By the end of the first year, he'd raised the rent on the second unit to $2,000, meaning his out-of-pocket housing costs dropped to $200 per month. The duplex appreciated in value too. Within 3 years, it was worth $350,000. He'd gained $70,000 in equity, much of it paid for by his tenant, while living more cheaply than he would have renting. Purchase 6: The Unglamorous Transportation. While Tyler was on his third financed vehicle, a sleek new sedan with a $540 monthly payment, Marcus made a very different choice for his sixth major purchase. He bought a 5-year-old Honda Civic with 90,000 miles on it. He paid $11,000 cash. The car was boring, unremarkable, completely lacking in status or style. It was silver gray, the automotive equivalent of oatmeal. Tyler actually laughed when he saw it. "Dude, you can afford better than that," Tyler said, gesturing at his own new car. "You've got a good job, you've got your side thing going. Why are you driving that?" Marcus just smiled. What Tyler didn't understand was that the Civic represented freedom. No car payment meant $540 per month that Marcus could invest instead. Over 30 years, at 8% returns, that single decision would be worth over $800,000. But beyond the math, there was something psychological about not having a car payment. Marcus felt lighter, freer, less obligated to stay in a job he didn't love just to make payments. The Civic ran perfectly, cost almost nothing to insure and maintain, and got excellent gas mileage. When the transmission finally needed replacing 4 years later, Marcus paid $1,200 to fix it, rather than using it as an excuse to buy a new car. That repair gave him 3 more years of reliable transportation, making it one of the best investments he ever made. His philosophy was simple: transportation should get you from point A to point B reliably and cheaply. Anything beyond that was ego, not necessity. The money saved by driving a practical car instead of an impressive one could be deployed toward assets that actually built wealth rather than destroyed it. Purchase 7: The Health Investment. Marcus's seventh and final major purchase wasn't dramatic or exciting, but it might have been the most important. He invested in his health. At 27, after 3 years of building his business, managing his rental property, working his day job, and generally grinding nonstop, Marcus noticed something troubling. He was exhausted all the time. His decision making was getting sloppy. He'd gained 20 pounds. He was sleeping poorly and relying on energy drinks and coffee to function. He realized he'd been so focused on building wealth that he'd neglected the foundation that made everything else possible, his physical and mental health. So he made a commitment. He joined a gym for $40 per month. He hired a nutritionist for a one-time consultation that cost $200, but gave him a sustainable eating plan. He bought a fitness tracker for $150 to monitor his sleep and activity levels. He started budgeting an extra $75 per week for better quality food instead of living off cheap, convenient meals. Total monthly cost about $250. His friends thought he was being excessive. "You're spending that much money just to eat better and go to the gym?" Jennifer asked. "That seems like a lot." But Marcus understood what they didn't. His health determined everything else: his energy levels, his focus, his decision-making ability, his capacity to work on his side business after his day job, his resilience when dealing with difficult tenants or clients. All of it depended on his physical and mental state. Within 3 months of making health a priority, Marcus noticed dramatic changes. He was sleeping better, which meant he was more productive during the day. He had more energy for his side business. His decision-making improved. He was less reactive, more patient, better able to handle stress. The financial impact was indirect but substantial. With better energy and focus, his side business grew faster. With better sleep, he made fewer impulsive purchases. With better stress management, he stuck to his investment plan even when markets were volatile. Marcus came to view his health investment not as an expense, but as performance enhancement for everything else he was trying to accomplish. It was the foundation that made all his other financial strategies possible. Now, sitting in his apartment on his 30th birthday, Marcus reflected on the journey. 8 years had passed since that rainy afternoon when he'd bought a $4 book that changed his life. His side business now generated $6,000 per month in mostly passive income. He'd hired help and systematized operations. His investment accounts had grown to over $300,000. His duplex had appreciated to $420,000, and he'd paid down the mortgage to where he had $200,000 in equity. Total net worth, $847,392. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real wealth Marcus had built was freedom. Freedom to leave his day job if he wanted to. Freedom to take risks on new business ventures. Freedom to help his parents when unexpected medical expenses arose. Freedom to say no to opportunities that didn't align with his values. Freedom to design his life according to his own priorities rather than financial obligations. He thought about Tyler, still financing cars and complaining about being broke despite earning a six-figure salary. He thought about Jennifer, talented and hardworking, but trapped in a job she hated because she needed the paycheck to maintain her lifestyle. He thought about his college classmates, many of whom appeared successful on social media but were quietly drowning in debt and anxiety. The difference wasn't intelligence or luck or family money. Marcus hadn't inherited anything, hadn't won the lottery, hadn't made any brilliant investment bets. He'd simply made 7 strategic purchases over 8 years and let compound interest, both financial and otherwise, do its work. The side hustle had taught him to create value independently. The index funds had built wealth automatically in the background. The travel had expanded his perspective and confidence. The education had increased his skills and earning potential. The real estate had leveraged other people's money to build equity. The practical car had freed up resources for better investments. The health commitment had given him the energy and focus to execute everything else. Each purchase had compounded on the others. The side hustle generated extra money for investments. The investments created security that allowed him to take business risks. The travel and education opened his mind to new opportunities. The real estate created passive income. The cheap car freed up cash flow. The health investment ensured he had the capacity to capitalize on all of it. Marcus opened his laptop and started writing, not for himself, but for others who might be where he was 8 years ago. Confused, overwhelmed, watching everyone else seem to have it figured out while feeling lost themselves. He wanted them to know that building wealth in your 20s wasn't about deprivation or sacrifice. It wasn't about being cheap or missing out on life. It was about being strategic, thinking long term, and understand every financial decision compounds into either freedom or obligation. The 7 purchases he'd made weren't magic. They were simple, boring, unglamorous decisions that most people overlook in favor of things that make them feel successful right now. But those 7 decisions had built something far more valuable than the appearance of success. They'd built actual freedom. His phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Birthday drinks tonight? My treat. Just picked up a bonus at work. Marcus smiled and typed back, Sure, sounds good. Congrats on the bonus. Investing any of it. The response came quickly. Lol, yeah, investing in a down payment for a new truck. The BMW is getting old. Time to upgrade. Marcus sighed and set down his phone. Some lessons apparently had to be learned the hard way. He looked back at his laptop screen at the number that represented 8 years of strategic decisions and delayed gratification $847,392. 8 years ago, he'd made a choice. He decided to play a different game than everyone around him. While they optimized for looking successful, he'd optimized for actually building wealth. While they chased status symbols and Instagram moments, he'd quietly acquired assets and skills and experiences that compounded into real freedom. The crazy thing was, he'd enjoyed his 20s. He'd traveled, learned, grown, experienced things many of his peers hadn't. He just did it strategically, investing in things that gave him both immediate fulfillment and long term value. Now, at 30, he had something most people twice his age didn't have: options. Real, genuine financial options. He could continue building his business. He could travel for a year. He could pursue a passion project that might not make money. He could help family members in need. He could invest in opportunities that excited him, all because 8 years ago, he'd started making different purchases than everyone around him. Marcus closed his laptop and stood up, stretching. He had birthday drinks with Tyler tonight. Tomorrow, he'd get to work on his business, continue his automated investments, maybe look at a second rental property. The journey wasn't over. But looking back at those 7 strategic purchases, at the quiet discipline of playing the long game while everyone around him optimized for the short term, Marcus knew he'd made the right choices. And the best part? The compound interest was just getting started.